You're standing in line. 10 seconds pass. Your thumb is already moving toward your phone. You don't even decide to do it. Your hand just goes. That itch, that restless static behind your eyes when nothing is happening, you've felt it 1,000 times. In waiting rooms, at red lights, during the 2 minutes before a meeting starts. But here's the strange part. Your ancestors spent hours, sometimes entire afternoons, doing what looks to you like absolutely nothing. Sitting, watching, waiting for an animal that might never come. And they weren't reaching for anything. So what did they have that you don't? For most of the last few decades, the story you've probably heard about early humans goes something like this. Life was a brutal, non-stop scramble for food, shelter, and safety. No time to be bored, too busy surviving. The anthropologist Marshall Solins broke that story apart in 1966. He studied hunter-gatherer societies still living the way humans had lived for almost all of their history, and found something nobody expected. They worked, on average, 3 to 5 hours a day gathering food. The rest of the time, genuinely the majority of their waking hours, was unstructured, resting, socializing, doing nothing in particular. Salins called it the original affluent society, not because they had more stuff, because they had more time, which raises an obvious question. If your ancestors had all this open, unstructured time, why weren't they bored out of their minds? To answer that, you have to understand what boredom actually is, not the feeling, the function. The psychologist John Eastwood, who has spent his career studying this exact question, defines boredom as the unpleasant experience of wanting to be engaged in something and being unable to find that engagement. It's not laziness. It's not having nothing to do. It's a mismatch. Your mind wants meaningful input, and it isn't getting any. That mismatch is a signal, like hunger, like thirst. The philosopher Andreas Elpidoro put it simply, boredom is a guide. It exists to push you out of situations that aren't working and toward ones that might. When you feel bored, your brain isn't malfunctioning. It's telling you to move. So the real question isn't whether your ancestors felt boredom. They almost certainly did. The question is what that feeling was pointing them toward, and how often they actually needed the push. Picture an early human sitting at the edge of a clearing, waiting for game to appear. From the outside, it looks like nothing is happening. From the inside, everything is happening. You wind direction, the specific way a branch moves when an animal brushes past it versus when it's just the breeze. The call of one bird changing pitch because something is approaching. The temperature shift as clouds pass overhead. Every one of these was information that mattered, sometimes for a meal, sometimes for staying alive. Their environment was, by necessity, dense with relevant signal. Nature doesn't hand you a summary. You have to read it constantly in real time. And a brain that's actively reading its environment for survival-critical information isn't a brain starved for engagement. That's the twist. Ancient humans weren't bored less often because their lives were more exciting. They were bored less often because doing nothing, for them, was never actually nothing. And when the signal reading genuinely ran out, when the watch was over, the food was gathered, the light was fading, that unstructured time Solins found didn't vanish into a void. It went somewhere. The anthropologist Robin Dunbar has spent decades studying what filled those hours in small-scale societies, and his answer is almost embarrassingly simple. Each other. Grooming. Talking. What we'd now call gossip. Dunbar argues that language itself may have evolved as a more efficient version of the social bonding that primates do with their hands, a way to maintain twice as many relationships in the same amount of time. Idle hours became social hours. Boredom, if it showed up at all in that window, had somewhere obvious to point, toward the person sitting next to you. Toolmaking filled the rest. Napping a stone edge, weaving fiber, repairing a hide, tasks with no urgency, done slowly, often while talking. No one felt the need to announce how productive the afternoon had been. There was no one to perform busyness for, not chores in the way you'd think of them today. Something closer to what you'd call a hobby, except every hobby also happened to be useful. Notice what's missing from that picture. Nowhere in it is a moment where a person sits with open hands, open time, and genuinely nothing pulling at their attention. The environment pulled, the people pulled, the task in front of them pulled. Boredom had almost no open door to walk through. Now compare that to your 10 seconds in line. Your environment today is, in a strange way, understimulating in exactly the ways that matter and overstimulating in exactly the ways that don't. The room you're standing in has no wind to read, no animal calls encoding danger, nothing your ancestral brain recognizes as worth tracking. So the itch shows up almost instantly. That unpleasant mismatch Eastwood described, your mind asking for meaningful engagement and finding none. And then, within arm's reach, is a device engineered by some of the smartest people alive to resolve that itch in under a second. Every time, recent tracking puts the average person somewhere close to 200 phone checks a day. That's roughly once every 5 waking minutes, not because there's always something urgent waiting. It rarely is, because the itch shows up that often, and the fix is always closer than the discomfort can travel. This is the part that should stop you. Boredom for your ancestors was a signal that pushed them somewhere, toward the tree line, toward a task, toward a conversation. For you, it's a signal that gets answered before it can finish sending. You feel the first flicker of restlessness, and your phone intercepts it before the feeling even has a chance to do its job. Elpidoru's research suggests something worth sitting with here. Boredom, left alone, doesn't just make you uncomfortable, it makes you creative. Studies on boredom and problem solving have found that people who are allowed to be bored, genuinely phone-free bored, perform better afterward on tasks requiring original thinking. The discomfort is doing something. It's clearing space. Your ancestors got that space by default. Their world simply didn't have an instant relief button. There's a deeper piece to this too. Boredom isn't only about stimulation, it's about meaning. Eastwood's research draws a sharp line between being unstimulated and being unengaged. You can be surrounded by input, noise, notifications, an endless feed, and still feel that hollow, restless mismatch because none of it feels like it matters to you. That's arguably the modern condition in one sentence. Not a lack of stimulation, a lack of stakes. For someone whose next meal genuinely depended on noticing the right signal at the right moment, nothing that mattered ever felt optional to pay attention to. The stakes were built in. You don't get to zone out on a task that keeps you alive. You, on the other hand, live in a world engineered to remove stakes from almost everything you do moment to moment, which is, in its own way, a kind of safety your ancestors never had. But it comes with a cost nobody warned you about. When nothing feels like it matters, boredom doesn't have anywhere useful to point you. It just sits there, unanswered, until your thumb moves toward the phone again. So, why did ancient humans never seem to get bored the way you do? Not because they had richer inner lives, or more willpower, or some evolutionary advantage you've lost. It's because their world gave boredom almost nothing to work with. Every quiet moment was already loaded with signal that mattered, and when boredom did show up, there was no instant off switch waiting in their pocket, so it had to finish its job, pushing them toward a task, a person, an idea, before it let go. You still have the exact same wiring they did, the same restless signal, the same discomfort, the same pull toward engagement. What's changed is everything around it. A world that manufactures fake urgency in place of real stakes and hands you a way to silence the itch before it ever gets to finish the sentence it's trying to say to you. Next time you feel that 10-second itch in line, at a red light, in the quiet before a meeting starts, try not reaching for the fix. Let the signal finish talking. Your ancestors always did.